Welcome to a desperate playthrough of Elden Ring. I'm calling it that because this was recorded in pretty much the last hour of the last day of the network test, so I was desperately trying to get a good playthrough under my belt at the last minute. In my last video, I had 30 minutes to showcase the game as best I could, so I spent a lot of time planning and playing it out perfectly. For this playthrough, I kinda had to improvise a bit more.
Of heart, then perhaps a more physical lesson is in order.
This fight with Vare actually ended up being a really good example of Elden Ring's combat at its best. It uses all the new techniques like guard counters and jumping attacks, but also, you know, the Dark Souls favorites like just good spacing and weapon range.
Maidenless runt. Who do you think?
So apparently that guy's dialogue is written by Miyazaki himself. It's just funny to imagine him sitting and writing dialogue that calls all of his players maidenless runts and tells them to go and die in a ditch. We kind of use this little ditch off to the right to sneak past the tree sentinel. Actually, one thing I want to test when the game is out is if the bushes that I'm sneaking through, if they give you extra stealth like they do in Sekiro. I get the sense that they do. Anyway, in my last playthrough video, I was hit with a lot of comments criticizing the game as looking too easy, and I kind of want to address that for a moment, even though this topic is very controversial, very complicated, and there are just so many variables like player skill or the items you come across and use, and whether those items are overpowered or underpowered in this beta. I just want to point out that that video, even though it's 30 minutes of unedited gameplay, it was pretty heavily planned by me. You know, I had played the game for around 24 hours at that point. I was pretty experienced with it. I had 30 minutes to experience and show off most of what this area has to offer, and I needed to meet my goal of reaching the final boss. So, you know, I chose items that I liked, and I planned to get the powerful items that I knew would help me get there. This playthrough, on the other hand, is rougher. But that's good, because in the last video I couldn't afford to mess up, because I wouldn't be able to get through and show you guys everything in the allotted amount of time. But this time, I strike out on random paths, I set high goals, I fail, I improvise, I overcome them sometimes, and I feel like that is way truer to the whole, you know, Souls experience, and at the end of the day, that's what we want. And this game has that spark, let me assure you. One goal I did have for this network test playthrough was to power stance some weapons, so obviously I chose the battle axe, which is one of the few that you can power stance by starting with the champion class and buying another battle axe from Kale. Oh, I just remembered that's why we killed white-faced Vare at the start of the game, by the way. You guys must be wondering why we killed him. No, we needed 500 extra runes in order to buy the battle axe and all that other stuff from Kale. Not that you really need an excuse to kill that guy, anyway. He's kind of a dick. He really screams at you here. I like it. He's actually got a lot of character, which I think is important for dragons, because when you dine on a dragon heart, you get to use their signature abilities, and his is a roar. Crabs are always going to be like one of the scariest enemies in these games, because they're one of the few that can outrun you and attack you at the same time. You could just hear there, I don't know if you noticed, but you could hear a slam, and the crab was right behind me that whole time. Terrifying. So these playthrough videos are actually quite useful for showing you guys areas that I didn't get a chance to show off in my previous ones. This is one of the cooler dungeons. It's huge and it's got a great theme. It's got that Stonefang Tunnels theme from Demon Souls. And it's pretty tough if you decide to fight all the enemies here as well, especially if you don't two-hand your weapon, otherwise it'll just bounce off their stone skin. Okay, I'm pretty sure that last attack that enemy did should have killed me. Let's get an instant replay on that. I'm pretty sure I missed the iframe and the attack went over my head as I rolled. So yeah, I was feeling a bit intimidated at this point in my playthrough after that experience with the miner, so I decided, okay, I need to get through this. I'm gonna stealth. And stealth works so well in this dungeon. Like, I guess all of the miners are busy facing the wall and mining. Although I guess by stealthing you don't get to loot all that precious glintstone that's embedded in the walls. So interestingly, the main boss of this area is hidden off that mid-elevator jump. That was a statue of Marika back there. That's how you know there's a boss coming. So one thing I figured out is that jumping attacks are very good against these guys because they're a slow-moving, human-sized enemy. You can cue your jump attack before they get a chance to start their own attack, and it staggers them as well. So yeah, I ran past a fair amount of stuff in this cave. But I do feel like that's actually a symptom of the network test, which was time restricted. In the full game, you'll want to clear the entire dungeon and loot everything and properly invest in your character. Not gonna lie, that guy scared the hell out of me the first time I played. It's a good thing I don't have face cam. Anyway, this is the first boss of the Limgrave Tunnels. It's a stone digger troll, and the name implies that he was brought down here long ago to mine, enslaved, like a lot of his kin. So you'll notice I summoned the Noble Sorcerer for this fight, and in this fight I feel like you don't really want melee summons because they'll just get stomped by this boss. The Noble Sorcerer, on the other hand, he's at his best at a distance. Although his best still isn't very good. He kind of gets destroyed by this boss once he gets aggro. But he's good at getting aggro and pulling him away from you at really critical moments so you can heal or get some spells off. Okay, I didn't expect the second attack there. So I hope this is doing a good job of convincing a few people, at least, that the game retains difficulty in a lot of places. But what I'm starting to really love about Elden Ring, after going back and really reviewing and thinking about a lot of my footage, is that it really makes you fight in different ways quite well. Like, just taking this area as an example, during this run-through I've learned that one-handing my weapon against these enemies isn't going to work. I've learned that jumping attacks are great, and if you try to block this boss with a shield, that is not going to go well for you. Which is different than the rest of the network test, because shields are very, very powerful, and you basically need a powerful shield to beat the main boss of this network test. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that you can get through this game probably with one playstyle, but you're incentivized to try different things and try different playstyles in order to have the best chances. Look at the boss turn right there. The Noble Sorcerer distracts him so well, and it lets me get off 2 incredible dragon fires. I love the projectile on Dragonfire. It just spews flame throughout the cave and leaves imprints all over the walls. It's crazy. So our sorcerer buddy really gets it here, but he's done his job well. So that, the Dragon Scale Blade, is our reward for finishing this dungeon. It's a weapon that was forged from the memories of dragonkin soldiers, burnished with the essence of draconic immortality. Alas, the dragonkin never attained immortality, and perish as mere imitations of the ancient dragons. From Software still playing with a lot of the same concepts for dragons as they do in their previous games. What I love about this moment when you come out of the dungeon is that it's raining now. It's a different time of day. The world outside has progressed, regardless of what you're doing inside that cave. I was so close to aggroing that crab. I remembered at the last second, and I just saw its breath coming up from the swamp. It's a cool detail. So I'm feeling a little bit confident, or suicidal, so I decided to try and take on Agheel, the flying dragon. And I realized you can summon here. Look at him. He's terrified, he just runs away and cowers. Yeah, how can I beat this guy without my sorcerer buddy? I'm thinking, so I better leg it. Thank you for being a good distraction. I realized afterwards that the noble summons, or any of the summons that look like the hollows from Dark Souls, they obviously have the same AI as the enemies that they're the spirits of, so those enemies are coded to cower in fear from huge dragons or certain enemies. Specifically for the nobles though, there's actually a little burnt ruin on that lake that Agheel dominates, and it's called the Dragon Burnt Ruins, and within those ruins there's tons of nobles, and if you sneak around and listen to what they're saying, they're actually looking over at where the dragon is, and they're chanting his name and worshipping him.
Feral flame of Agheel, burn true.
In a recent video I put out, I did some research on whether day or night or weather effects affect your stealth. Interestingly, night does seem to improve your stealth, but rain doesn't, from what I could tell, which I feel like is a bit of a shame. I feel like that would be a dynamic way to encourage your stealth, regardless of the time of day. Anyway, what we're creeping around now is one of the same carriages that is pulled by the two giants off down the road. I'll show them on screen. Interestingly, we've tracked the path they take, and they drag that carriage all the way down to this, the Gateside Ruins. I assume it's the last stop before it's taken up towards Stormvale Castle, indicating that it's valuable loot for those above. Another interesting thing I show off now is that Melina can actually be summoned at, I think, any overworld site of grace, as long as it's the third one you visit. That means they've put a lot of different Melina cutscenes into the game, depending on which direction you take in this open world. Remember, the network test kind of walls us off. Not everyone will go in this direction. Okay, I forgot to get the map, and I warped to the wrong place as a result. The bare bones map that you do get is pretty bad, but it does show really rough outlines of the path, and it still shows your warp points, of course. So at this point, I'm desperately trying to figure out how to get enough runes to buy a torch. Torches are really important, and I kind of decide to sell the clothes off my back here in order to get one. Torches are good. In a lot of the caves, especially the one we're headed to now, it's hard to get through without a torch. It gives those early Dark Souls 2 demo vibes. I'm sure a lot of you will remember that. In the dungeon we just explored, we talked about how this game does a pretty good job of motivating you to play in different ways, and torches are a great example of that. You know, they force you to take away your shield, and they force you to fight one-handed a lot of the time, unless you want to fight through the cave in complete darkness, which, you know, is also doable. So I love that dynamic. I love the way it sort of switches up the gameplay. So we're heading down to a cave on the beach that's filled with demi-humans. And if we go that way, we have to fight a troll. And trolls can be quite good at knocking you off your horse and killing you. They can sort of shoot a sound wave that instantly knocks you off. Oh, and on the right, you can see that I just looted some mushrooms. Mushrooms are found in damp places, and they're good for crafting any type of firebomb type item, like a sleep pot or a holy water pot. I have no money, so I don't know why I came here. That nomadic merchant back there, he sells a lot of really good items. I'm keen to learn more about the nomadic merchant lore. They're a tribe that has long been spurned by the grace of gold, giving them a sort of kinship with us, the Tarnished. So this is called the Dissenter's Cave, and it's named that because there is an NPC out in the world who was kicked out of this place. He is a demi-human. Like a lot of the creatures in here, he's not quite human. I love how you can hear them screaming from within the cave. I decide that guy's not really worth it, because there's more enemies down there, so I'll go this way. It's hard to say without testing, but I assume that having the torch out increases your aggro range and decreases your stealth. Anyway, I'll be quiet, and I'll let you soak in a bit of the atmosphere here. What's really cool about this boss fight is that you can actually initiate it from stealth. I don't think there's ever been a fight like that before, has there? There's no fog gate at the entrance or even at the exit, so maybe you could stealth all the way through. The enemies are patrolling, after all. And I'm just waiting for the perfect moment. I really should have pushed the offensive on the boss, because these enemies stagger you so bad when you're trying to cast Dragonfire. I'm trying to cleave them all down, but without poise, it's not easy. So yeah, the Dissenter's Cave is not super easy. I actually think there's a lot of ways you can approach it though. One way I'd love to try would be with sleep arrows, just sleeping all the minor enemies and maybe even the boss too. But at this point, it's time to cut our losses and try somewhere else. You know, failure can shape your journey as well, just like success can. I have a tendency in these games, and I'm sure a lot of you guys do it as well, but when I'm met with a difficult encounter, I'll just stubbornly try to beat it, you know, to a fault. I'll spend way too much time on it when I could just leave and come back, and probably beat it faster a lot of the time. So now, I'm, you know, just taking in the scenery, trying to think about where to go next. We should talk about these octopus creatures, actually. Here I pick up the land octopus ovary, something you can see all over the flesh of that creature. It reads, "They eat humans in order to bear young, and theirs is the blood that runs through these ovaries." So there's no coincidence they're right outside the demi-human cave. So right there was an invisible version of those grey scarabs that give Ashes of War when you defeat them. That one reads Ash of War Determination, and it's aptly named because it takes a damn long time to kill that thing for the first time, unless you use something like Dragonfire. I don't know why I decided to bully this guy, but after reviewing this footage, I'm glad I did because I noticed there's a little shipwreck there off to the left, and he's sitting by a campfire with a bunch of supplies. These guys strike me as a very Viking, or at least raider type of character, and it strikes me that they might have come here to the Lands Between by boat. There's actually a huge shipwreck off the coast to my left here as well. It's funny, you know, I haven't played the network test version for that long, but it's impressive how much the environment imprints on you. For example, here you can actually hear an owl hooting. And if you use this sound effect to help you find the owl, you realize that it gives you moon eggs, which are a very valuable craftable item. There are just a lot of little details like that, and I think being able to locate a lot of the stuff on the map, intuitively has a lot to do with it having no minimap and not many markers telling you where to go. You really have to rely on landmarks to tell you where interesting things are, like this smoldering giant. Now, I don't know why I thought fire would be good against the literal fire giant, but it wasn't. One thing you might have noticed about this giant is that he starts the fight at half health, and one thing you'll notice about the environment is that remains just like his appear to be just littered all over the ground. Put these things together and I'm pretty sure they're implying that this giant and many like him fell from the sky and, took damage when they landed as a result. Man, this fight is so cinematic sometimes. He just flicked some boulders towards me with his axe, and it knocked some trees over on the way and shattered against this little outcrop of rock that I was hiding behind. It's pretty amazing. Easy fight, but an awesome one. And when you learn more about the story, it just sort of adds more depth and flavor to this character. I'm sure a lot of you have seen Studio Ghibli's Castle in the Sky, and you can definitely tell that they've pulled a lot of the lore from that movie. I'm gonna have a couple of lore videos on the network test alone, and one of them talks about Elden Ring's Castle in the Sky, so subscribe for that. I actually feel like Elden Ring might be addictive more than any other Souls game before it. It just has these moments of discovery and excitement and combat interspersed with, relaxing while you ride around the world. Before, the only place you went to relax were like the hub worlds, and walking around Filing Shrine and leveling up and buying items, that's one thing, but exploring the world on horseback and just chilling, that's such a nice reprieve from the combat. And then when you find a dungeon or you find something and you're excited about the loot that you're going to get from it, that feeling is addictive. Right now, I'm sort of desperately trying to get 12 dexterity so that we can wield the dragon scale blade that we got at the very start. It's another example of how I didn't really plan out this playthrough too well. Let me skip ahead a little bit. Just selling a bunch of items, leveling up, and now I have the dragon scale blade. The dragon scale blade, more than any other item in the network test, just tells you that they're going to change the location of certain item drops. There's no way this item was dropped by a stone digger troll, in my opinion. And I think it's also likely they'll change like NPC locations as well, and that's all just so great, because one of the guilts I have about showing off the network test is that, I might be spoiling this for people, but hopefully this area changes pretty dramatically in the full game. In fact, a recent interview has actually revealed that Margit the Fell, the boss we're about to face, he's actually a skippable encounter. You don't have to fight him, which is strange because he's guarding the entrance to Stormvale Castle. There must be another way in or around this place. If you decide to roll through all of Margit's attacks, which a lot of Souls veterans do, it's so tough, it's challenging. So I summon help, and I want to show you what happens here. Margit pivots mid-attack because he gets hit by a glintstone pebble from my summon. Now, I don't know if all boss AI works this way, but it's actually a decent way of using ranged summons to your advantage. If you're a ranged build as well, I imagine you could sort of juggle boss aggro between you, because he really does seem to attack the last person that hit him. And this is something I wish I realized at this point. It's alright, I got him pretty low. My sorcerer will finish the job. I actually love that guy so much. And that's what I was hoping would happen with summons. I feel like that's the best case scenario. You know, you don't want something that's overpowered and finishes every fight for you. I kind of personally just want a summon that has a lot of character, you know, something that cowers from dragons when you don't expect it, or leads to just interesting situations like that. And if a summon is underpowered, it leads to situations like with Margit, where the summon can distract him at a key moment and surprise you. I feel like that's really memorable. So I feel like I played pretty well there. I mean, I am dead, but I have beaten him before without using a shield and without using that block method that I keep mentioning. But what happens if you decide to fight Margit with 2 summons? That was the next question I had. And you know, summoning traditionally makes these games way, way easier. I think the results of this will surprise you. Look at the damage I'm doing to him, for example. This fight is tough, even with summons. Remember also, we talked about before how Margit can turn on a dime and attack you at a moment's notice. While I'm busy throwing fireballs at trees and throwing fireballs at spears, one guy falls off the cliff. So it's just me and an enchanted knight now. And this enchanted knight, he knows how to beat this fight. You know, he's using the 100% physical block shield. And there are instances where he just tries to tank the boss for me, you can tell. But because I'm the one dealing damage to the boss a lot of the time, he just keeps going back to me. To be honest though, I'm quite glad that Margit seems more than capable of taking out multiple summons. This is no cakewalk. Although, I bet you could juggle him between you if you use sorcery at range. Anyway, I'm curious if this video changed some people's opinions about the difficulty. I'm glad I got to show a more honest playthrough, in a way. I'm really glad you guys seem to like the last playthrough, regardless. I've actually recorded quite a lot of playthroughs like this one that take interesting routes through the game. So if you want more content like this, where I kind of just chat about what's happening on screen and my thoughts about different parts of the game, then leave a like. It's not like you can leave a dislike anymore. Anyway, but soon I'm also going to be talking about the lore that's in the network test. And there's an insane amount. I actually think those videos might be a rare opportunity for you to really sort of understand what's happening and going on in the world before you play the game. So if that sounds interesting, subscribe. I hope you enjoy this small taste of what's to come in February, and I'll see you next time.